Welcome back to Ty and That Guy. I'm Wes Chatham, and this is my good friend, Timothy Franck. How you doing, Timothy?
I'm very blurry today.
You are blurry.
I'm feeling very blurry. Yeah. I got a new computer, and my new computer doesn't like my camera. My very fancy Canon camera that Amazon bought for me. And so now I'm using this old ass, like from 1973 web camera. And so I think it's got a 4 pixel output. So there's only 4 pixels of me.
You mean the web camera that the government spies on you with at all times? So this is, I'm getting a vision of what government and Russian spies see every day when you're on the computer. It's either that or you got bit by a vampire and you're in that transitional phase where it's like a little bit blurry and out of. And
eventually I'll just won't even be visible on cameras anymore.
And I can picture you as what is that what is the movie Walk in the Shadow Out of the Shadows?
What We Do in Shadows?
What We Do in the Shadows. I could picture you, Ty, like becoming friends with vampires and like serving them so they'd finally bit you, and so you finally got bit. So congratulations. Hope you have a nice transition.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Although I would rather be one of the werewolves. I do like the werewolves.
Yeah. Is the show half as funny as the movie? Did you ever watch the show?
I have watched the show. I think the show is very good. It's different. It doesn't feel exactly the same, but a lot of the same creative people are involved. So I think the quality level is very good.
Oh, okay.
On the show. And one other piece of housekeeping. The audience didn't see this, but before we got started, Joseph was sitting here having a celebratory glass of wine because his daughter went 3-0 in her tournament, the Tournament of Champions in softball, and apparently she's a great softball player because her team swept everybody.
Wow! Woo-hoo! Congratulations, Joseph. Come on!
Thank you.
Come on, real quick, you proud daddy.
Yep.
So
this is the team.
So did they win the championship?
No. They're 3 games away from being in the championship.
Oh, well, then get the fuck off. Come to us when you're champions, all right? This is a podcast for champions.
Yeah. All right.
No, I'm kidding. What happened? No, I'm not. Get off.
It was the first day of what is called bracket play. It's basically all of the practice warm-up games are done, and it determines the rest of the tournament. So once you lose, you go in the loser's bracket. It gets a lot harder because you have to play twice the amount of games. So if they keep winning, they have to win 3 more times, and they're then in the championship game. So we're hopeful. Everything's going pretty good. All the girls are having a good time. And
what position does she play?
She plays third and outfield, and she's been like she had an on base. I was telling Jen this. Her on base percentage is for the tournament over 750.
Damn.
Wow.
So she's crushing her at bats then.
Well, the funny thing is like she's very patient. And she's been hit by pitch 5 times. And she has had about 5 walks.
Oh, wow.
So she's been getting on base, and I'm like, that's what you want. You want people on base. And today she had a walk-off hit for winning the game yesterday, and today they came from behind, and you probably are hearing them right now.
Well, cool.
But I will get out of here. Thank you for the shout out.
Congratulations. Wes and I have no great victories to celebrate of our own, so we have to like glom onto Joseph's daughter's win.
So, like Joseph's doing.
Yeah.
Today
all right. So
sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say. So today we are finally going to talk about a movie that maybe the most influential movie in Wes's life. Would you agree it's the most influential movie in your life?
Well, you know our ongoing theme with the podcast. You know, you gotta. There's the number 0 place that's always there, and we know that. But no, I would have to say if I was going to be stranded on an island. I was going to take one movie with me. Like my favorite movie of all time, legitimately, is Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah.
Where is it on your top 10 list?
Oh, I mean, it's definitely top 10.
Yeah.
I mean, without question. And I think arguably one of the greatest American movies ever made.
What's interesting is I did a screening last night of Raiders of the Lost Ark in the town that I live in. They do this art institute. They do all these events and certain things to promote art. Well, now they're doing a cinema one, and I'm a part of it. We chose to do Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I wanted to open it up to listeners or people that are in the Atlanta area to come hang out with us and do the thing. But the thing sold out like that, and it didn't have anything to do with me. It had to do with one of the greatest movies at all time, and it still has drawing power. In the whole event sold out like that. But we had such a great time talking about the movie. We watched the movie, then we had a big conversation about the movie afterwards. And what I was really curious is I was happy to see there were some kids in the crowd that have never seen the movie. And
wow.
And one of my deep fascinations with these movies, like Ghostbusters or Raiders or any of these things that just have magic in them, that have just, you watch them and they're so compelling, is what is it that makes it these so great? Raiders of the Lost Ark comes out, and just like Star Wars, there was a ton of imitations after that.
Oh yeah.
Some of the ones that were good were like Romancing the Stone, and there was Quigley's Down Under and a few things like that were actually really good and interesting. But nothing. This is 40 years ago. This movie was made 40 years ago, and we screened this movie, and afterwards. And it still had the same cinematic power. It held people's attention. They were enthralled. They were involved. And then afterwards, I had a conversation with the kids that had never seen it before, and they dug it, which is, really hard to get kids to watch movies and whatever. They dug it. And so it is a masterclass on every single department that worked on this film. And it's such a great film to talk about and discuss. Do you remember where you were when you first saw it?
So... One of the great, I think, what's the word that I'm looking for? One of the great cognitive dissonances of my mother's life is that she does belong to a very conservative, restrictive, religious group, and has only gotten more conservative as the years have gone on. But when I was young, one of the things that she loved, she was really into reading. So she's the one who first gave me my first copy of like The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, which like now she probably would never read those books. Like she's gotten so much more conservative over time, but she gave me that stuff. And she loved movies. And so every now and then she would take me to a movie because she knew I love movies too. My father doesn't give a shit about movies. He doesn't care. But she would take me to movies, and Raiders of the Lost Ark was one that she and my father went and saw. And she came back and she was so excited. Like she was like the greatest movie she'd ever seen. And she said, I'm taking you to that movie. So she took me to it. The one downside to that is that she was so excited and was talking so much about it. She spoiled a couple of the best moments of that movie before I saw it. Like she was telling me about stuff that had happened. And so when I watched it, there were some surprising moments in the movie that I didn't get because she had kind of spoiled them. But even with that, even with the spoilers, like I remember, I don't remember what age I was, but I was not that old, like a young teenager maybe. And that movie just blew my mind. Like I had never seen anything like it before. And I remember watching it and going, why aren't all movies like this? This is what movies are supposed to look like. Why doesn't every movie look like this?
What's interesting, if I go back, so I was too young for the first Raiders of the Lost Ark. But one of the very first movies that I ever went to, my dad took me to, and I would go stay with my dad in the summer. At that time, I was living in Savannah, and every summer I would go visit my dad. We would go see all the movies. So the early 80s summer movies, I have just the greatest memories, like Karate Kid, 16 Candles, but most powerful movie going experience, and one that I never forgot, is my dad took me to see Temple of Doom. That's the first movie I was old enough to see.
Yep.
And I saw Temple of Doom. And I know, it's kind of like when I Return of the Jedi was one of the other first movies that I went and seen. And I know that Return of the Jedi or Temple of Doom is not people's favorite of each film series, but I fucking love them. I loved Temple of Doom. I loved Return of the Jedi because it was such a powerful movie going experience.
Yeah.
And I remember watching it in Short Round because now you had a kid's perspective within the movie and a kid experiencing Indiana Jones. And so you kind of, if you're about the same age, so you kind of see the world through that kid's eyes. And it was the kid from Goonies, and it was just, actually I think Goonies was after, but it was such a powerful experience for me that it became a drug. And I still go to the movies looking for that drug to feel the way that I did when I first saw. Yeah, I want that hit, man. I want
the dragon, man.
Chasing the dragon, man.
Yeah.
And then I remember me and Dad seeing that, and then I remember every time I'd come visit him, we would rent Raiders of the Lost Ark at the theater. Like that was our thing. Raiders, and I might even have, it's kind of hazy if I saw Raiders first and knew about Temple of Doom. Maybe I saw it on HBO or something. But Raiders is one of those movies that I watch once a year. And it's one of those movies that I never get tired of. We watched it last night, and I was like, I need to pay attention because we're going to have a conversation about this, and I need to really know. And I got swept up like I did all the other times. And there was no moment of where I was like, all right, I want to go, I'll go to the back. Like I wanted to take a minute to, I was enthralled the whole time. And so I love when we do these podcasts because I am fascinated about these movies that just seem to have magic in them. That, for whatever reason, you don't get tired of them. It grows with you. It changes as you change. You see deeper meanings through it. It's a movie that works on so many different layers. There's the fun action. But one of the things that movies that imitate great movies, like big blockbusters, because I think Jaws was the first blockbuster, and this is the first, and Raiders is a movie that perfected the blockbuster. And with movies like this, it works on all the fun levels, like these great set pieces, these action set pieces, and great characters. But at the heart of it is a true story and an evolution of Indiana Jones that is the scaffolding that the story and all the sequences and all the fun stuff is built upon. And the imitation movies, I think, a lot of times forget about that. And they just have all the fun stuff, this action and stuff like that, but they forget about a story. They forget about investing in somebody that we care about, and there's something, the movie has something to say.
So Narain Shankar, the showrunner on The Expanse, who he and I have remained very close and are actually working on new projects together. But one of the things he always says talking about TV shows, and I think this is true of movies too, is for the thing to not work, 3 things have to go wrong. But for it to work, 1,000 things have to go right. And so the idea being that it is much easier to fail than it is to succeed when you're making something like this. And when you watch something like Raiders of the Lost Ark, what you are seeing is somehow every department got it right. Every department. We talked to Joanne Hansen a little while back and talking about how much costumes matter. And so the costume department got it right. The props department got it right. The casting department cast the perfect person in every role. Every actor was at the absolute top of their game. Steven Spielberg was at the peak of his powers in directing. If you watch just from an editing standpoint, it is one of the most perfectly edited movies I've ever seen. The cinematography is these brilliant golds, and like every scene feels like it's at the golden hour, like it's just so beautifully shot. And you go through the whole thing and you just can't find anything on that movie that anyone got wrong. So it's Narain's thing of 1,000 things went right, and it is so hard to replicate that. It is so hard to, and as to your point, the story. The screenplay is great. The screenplay is fantastic. It's full of like witty dialogue and big surprises and like you were saying, it has heart. Like the story has heart. You care about the characters. Very quickly we come to love these people and care about them and want them to win. That's hard to do. You see something like that, and when that kind of magic happens, I don't know what you ascribe that to. Yes, Steven Spielberg is a great director, and he seems to get that kind of magic more often than most other directors do. but even he isn't 100%. So I don't when this kind of magic happens, you just have to celebrate it and hope you get to see it again, because there's no way to like consistently replicate something like that.
It's interesting you bring up Spielberg, because back in 1977, George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, Star Wars was about to come out. And George Lucas, and this is a story that probably a lot of people know, but George Lucas was getting anxious about the opening day, so they decided to go out of town. They went on a trip. He took his buddy Steven. They're on the beach building sandcastles. Then the morning showings and everything came in, and then, they realized that Star Wars is a massive fucking hit. So George Lucas took a sigh of relief, and then he started talking about what he wanted to do next, because at this point he could do whatever the fuck he wanted to do.
Yeah.
So he started talking to his pal Spielberg, and he was like, what would you want to do next? And Spielberg said, I always wanted to direct a James Bond film, and it's something I want to do. And then Lucas said, I got something better than that. And he said, he was inspired by the Republic serials that they used to watch as kids. Yep. And this is interesting. In those days, they didn't have TV, so you would go to the movies. And when you go to the movies, before the main movie come on, they would show these serials, and it would always end on a cliffhanger, like Flash Gordon or The Lone Ranger. And it would end on these cliffhangers, and then you would come back next week and watch what happens next. And they fell in love with these serials, and these are the thing. I mean, George Lucas actually tried to buy Flash Gordon before he did Star Wars to make that movie. So he was inspired by it, and he had this idea for this archaeologist. He called him Indiana Smith. And the only problem that he had with making that movie is nobody wanted to do it with Steven. So we know Steven Spielberg now is like the biggest, most powerful director of all time. But there was a time in this period where he did Jaws, which is a massive hit, but Jaws was way over budget and they had a lot of trouble with it. Then he did Close Encounters, which was over budget, but it was a hit. Then he did 1941. And I think it was, probably Spielberg's only true whiff. Ironically, it still made money, but it was still, it was his only true miss, his strikeout at bat. So at that period, there wasn't studios jumping on doing this big action picture with Spielberg, which blows my mind. And it's funny because we always look back at history, and you judge people with who they are today looking at the past. You forget that there was a time where Spielberg was a hot shot up and coming director, just like other hot shot up and coming directors.
Yep.
So as a consequence to this, Spielberg was fucking motivated. He was like, all right, I'm going to show these motherfuckers that, number one, I'm the man, but number two, I can come in under budget and on time. And so luckily, Michael Eisner read the script, and he said, this is the best script ever made. George Lucas had this crazy back-end deal. He agreed upon to do that for 3 movies. Now they're off and running. Then, they started, working on the casting. What's interesting, and I'm sure you know this, Ty, but Lucas didn't want Harrison Ford as, because, Steven was like, what about Harrison Ford? And he goes, I did, graffiti with him and, Star Wars. I don't want it to be like a De Niro Scorsese situation. So I don't know about that. I don't want to do that. And this is a great insight into how big luck plays into this business and how powerful luck is, because they then cast Tom Selleck, and Joseph we're going to somehow include links on this podcast, because there's this great documentary that somebody made. It was on Facebook, but you watch the documentary, it's in real time, and as you're watching the movie, there's interviews of Spielberg cutting in about different scenes and different shots. There's behind the scenes in the movie, and there's screen tests of other actors. And one of them includes Tom Selleck and Sean Young. And it was a fantastic screen test. I mean, Tom Selleck's amazing. But Tom Selleck was contracted at CBS doing a little show called Magnum P.I. And they wouldn't let him out. So he did not get to be Indiana Jones. So then they go back and bring in Harrison Ford, and fucking Harrison Ford, man, talk about, being a carpenter in the right place at the right time, and, getting to be Han Solo, and then now you get to be fucking Indiana Jones. There's some cosmic shit happening there. And of course he was enthusiastic, and then that's, the rest is history.
I love Tom Selleck. I think he's fantastic, and he's been He's been consistently great for a very long time, so I don't think he has anything to prove to anybody. But I don't know if the movie works the same way with him as Indiana Jones. It's one of those alternate universe things. Like, I'm very curious to see the alternate universe in which he actually did the movie, because I don't think it's the same movie. I think there is a thing that Harrison Ford brings to that role that is very different than I think what Tom Selleck would have brought to it. And I think he was perfect. I think he was perfect as Indiana Jones, and I don't think anybody else would have been.
I definitely agree with you that it would be a different movie, but I also think Tom Selleck at that time was the only actor that would have made it, I wouldn't say as good, but really good.
Yeah.
Like, I think he
I'm not bashing Tom Selleck. Tom Selleck's great.
Yeah. His version of Indiana Jones would be something I would want to see. In any other version, any other actor, if at any other time, I wouldn't care to see their version of Indiana Jones. Harrison Ford is Indy for me. Harrison Ford is Han Solo for me. And Harrison Ford is Deckard.
Yeah.
But, I mean, Jesus Christ. Like, what a fucking career that guy's had. The only role I would like, because I'm a Magnum P.I. fan, and I would love to see that version, because Tom Selleck had the masculinity, the toughness, the grit, the intelligence, but he also had self-deprecating sense of humor that went along with it. And another thing to mention too, as we're about to get into the story, is you and I grew up in the 80s, and we are from the period of He-Man, of Rambo, of Commando, of these superhuman, just juiced out, oiled up superheroes, which are fucking awesome. I mean, your favorite movie of all time, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
What's my favorite movie of all time?
The Arnold, John Milius, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Oh, Conan.
You know,
how do you not remember Conan?
You know what's funny is there was a guy afterwards, big Expanse fan, that came, and we were having a conversation last night, and he told me his favorite movie was Conan, and I was like, my buddy Ty loves that movie. He goes, no way. Anyway, so I don't know why I drew a blank on that name, but there was something so intoxicating about seeing Indiana Jones, who is intelligent, who was tough, but he was just a man. And he was goofy sometimes. He made mistakes. He was vulnerable. There was a vulnerability to him. When he got punched, it hurt. And there were times where he didn't know he was figuring out as he's going along. You know, he didn't know what the next move was. I loved that. It reminds me a little bit of, the movie has a more serious tone, but like Kyle Reese in The Terminator. And I think that works so well because you have a man against a machine, an ordinary man against a machine, but his spirit and strength went out.
And in Raiders, you have an ordinary man against like the entire Nazi army.
Right.
But I agree. I mean, the thing that's great about Indy is I would not want to pick a fight with Harrison Ford back in that time. He was a big dude. So like, it's not like he's like a little wimpy guy, but he wasn't like you said, the roided out freaks, you know, the Schwarzeneggers, the Stallones, you know, he wasn't like that. And as you said, every time he took a hit or got hurt, like it felt like it stayed with him, which culminates in that fantastic scene on the boat where he finally gets a moment to rest, right? Like it's like the midway point of the movie. He's been doing all this crazy shit, and you see him, he can't even take his clothes off. He's so fucked up. He's so beat up. Like he's trying to take his clothes off and he can barely move, and he's covered with scrapes and bruises, and she's trying to doctor him and stuff. That's that scene you almost never get in an action movie. The price that the hero is paying for all this crazy action shit he's doing. And in that movie, it turns into a lovely scene between the two of them. So you get sort of a romantic feel to it. It's a little bit of a comedy scene, but you still get to feel the weight of it. You still get to feel like Indy is doing all this shit to try to capture this thing, and everything he's doing costs him something. And he's going to pay the price for it. He's paying the price for it.
Yeah. And he's goddamn handsome, but he's handsome and every man at the same time, which is really interesting. And it is that true. He really embodies that. Guys want to be friends with him and girls want to fuck him, and maybe some guys want to fuck him too. But his intelligence and his toughness and his grit is what makes him succeed. And his ability to figure out problems So let's start off. So I just we can go through this a few of the scenes and the sequences, but let's start off with that opening. And if you put a gun in my head and said, what is the greatest opening of all time? If there's aspiring writers that are listening to this, Lawrence Kasdan this is a masterpiece of an opening. Yep. Within this opening, you know the tone of the movie, the characters, the character strength and weaknesses. You learn so much before he even says a word. And also he creates mystery around him. There's this, you don't see his face. You know, it starts off in this Paramount Mountain, which was cool, where the thing dissolves, and it's Paramount Mountain, which they didn't have CGI at the time. Like, some poor asshole had to like walk around the thing and find that. But you start off and you don't see his face, and somebody goes to betray him. They pull a gun on him, and all of a sudden a bullwhip flips out and then yanks the gun out of his hand. And you're like, you start to know everything there is about this guy, and he's got all these talents and cool things and cool abilities. And I don't want to jump through the sequence if you want to have something to say, but as they're going through the tunnel, you see that he's intelligent, that he's thinking things through. But most importantly, and really important to what I think is the growth of Indy through the film, is that there's a certain statue they see that represents some within their religion, or it was something bad, something evil. So they get scared and they run off. But Indy he doesn't even have time for it. He's not interested. So now you realize that he's into the idol. He's into the thing that he's after, but he's not caught up in the superstition of the thing. He's past that. And then, he makes his way, and he uses his mind and his intelligence, and he has Alfred Molina with him. And Alfred Molina is kind of, it's almost a Sherlock Holmes Watson, where he's kind of explaining to him, so you kind of really see like how masterful and everything is. And then when he gets to the idol, he makes a mistake. He's trying to weigh out the sand, and he's doing this and that, and he puts it on there, and he thinks he's got it, and he turns around, and the thing goes, and then he gets fucking betrayed. So now you realize, like, oh, he can fuck up. Like, he can make mistakes, and he's not somebody that it's not James Bond. He doesn't have a, then he's that really funny moment where he's running and he's holding on to his hat, and he's like, start and he's screaming at the top of his lawn, and he's hauling ass, he's running crazy, jumps in the pond, hops on the plane, gets in the plane, he makes it out. Now you're enthralled and entranced, but then they hit you with a little bit of humor and this great setup where there's a fucking snake on the plane. And he's like, I fucking hate snakes. He's in the bag and he's telling him, and he's like, have a little backbone, will ya? And so this guy who's so brave and just went through all of this shit to get this golden idol, and he gets in and he's terrified of this snake. So there's a level of vulnerability and mistake making and toughness and masculinity and intelligence, and it's all there in the opening. And if you want to tell a story, that is a masterclass in how you open a film.
And I will say that have a little backbone, will ya, is the greatest punchline to a 10-minute setup of a joke ever done. Like, because then everything that happened before that is just the setup for that joke. And it is fucking brilliant. It is fucking brilliant. But I will say, from a screenwriting standpoint, there's another thing that's happening in there that's really important. Because it looks like our world, right? It looks like the real world. It's guys trudging through the jungle. It's the world we live in, but in the 20s or 30s is the idea, right? But part of what happens as they move through it is finding the poison darts and the idols, and then getting in the cave, and him putting his hand in the light so that the trap springs, and him avoiding the pressure plates on the floor. All of that is world building. It's telling you, yeah, this is the real world, but it's a real world in which ancient civilizations could make light triggered traps, which of course nobody could really do, but it's kind of explaining, yeah, it's just almost like our world, but it's a little more magical. It's just a little more magical than our world. And that is so important for the audience to know once they get further into the story. Because as we go further into the story, it remains that. It's our world, guns work, cars work, People fly in airplanes. Nobody can cast magic spells. It's our world, but there's just a hint of magic in it, right? So that when we find the Ark and the Ark is magical, that's okay because it's already been established that there's just a little magic in this world, right? That's such good storytelling. It's such good world building. And if you look at it, it's so subtle. It's little things like he puts his hand in light and a trap comes out and your brain goes, oh, so this ancient civilization could make traps that were triggered by light. And you just accept that. Like, well, okay, I guess that makes sense. Even though it doesn't make any sense, there's no way to actually do that. You accept it. And by accepting it, you accept, oh, okay, there's magic in this world without knowing that that's what you're doing. Brilliant storytelling, just brilliant world building.
That's a great point. That's a really good point because the Ark is so close to real life and so close to religion, but it doesn't matter if you believe in it or not. The movie believes in it.
Yep.
So then the next scene after, which is like the perfect place to pick up after this, is he's teaching a class. And then you see this guy who was leather, getting shot at and running and fighting and, all the things, has to murder somebody. He's a college professor. And he's, nice, clean cut college professor, and everybody in the class is in love with him. And there's one thing I noticed watching it last night. I don't know what the story of this guy is, but there's so many stories like this, and like there's so many details that lead to other stories if you pay attention. There's layers of this movie, but at the end, all the girls are coming and dumping the apple, and then one dude gets up and he's just pissy, and he walks by and just throws the apple on the table and storms out, and you don't know what his story is.
I don't know. I don't think that guy was pissy. I don't think that guy was mad. I think that guy was
smitten,
shy, and embarrassed to be doing it.
Oh, I see.
I think that guy has a crush on Professor Jones, the same as all the girls do, and just didn't want to get caught, right?
Yeah. And he
looks like he's in a hurry because he's embarrassed.
Oh, that makes sense. Ty, maybe you were identifying a little bit with that. And that's kind of what you projected into it.
Oh, I Professor Jones could definitely get my apples. Just saying.
And but what I love about him is that he's intelligent, and that's kind of what his superpower is. But the scene where the girl closes her eyes and it says "I love you" in eyeshadow, that was actually the AD suggested that. They were having a conversation, whatever. The AG suggested that this would be funny. And Spielberg, this is what great geniuses are. There's a lot of directors that wouldn't take ideas from a below the line person. But Spielberg was like, oh, I like that idea. Let's try it. And they did it, and it got the biggest laugh in the movie. And it's just a testament to his willingness to collaborate with anybody, as long as they have a good idea and they're along in the thing. And I think his set seems like really fun to be on because it's just a creative endeavor for everybody involved in the movie.
And that's we started out talking about the 1,000 things that have to go right. That's just one of those 1,000 things. It's somebody in the crew had a good idea. The director is open to good ideas. It paid off. That's just one of those 1,000 moving parts that has to be right. And it's amazing how consistently this movie just got all of those little details right. That's why I started out by saying it feels like one of those movies where every single person working on it just was magic. Mm-hmm. I mean, look at this first AD. The first AD's job is to run. They're the field general of the production, right? They're not flashy. They're not the one who gets any of the credit, but they are marshaling the troops, right? That's their job. And so you don't typically think of first ADs as creatives. That's not their job. Their job is they're taskmasters. They're telling everybody what to do. And to have in this magical movie a first AD go, you know what, here's a funny idea. And it turns out it actually is a funny idea. And the director likes it and puts it in the movie. And like you said, it gets a big laugh in the thing. That is so unlikely. That is so not how things typically work in Hollywood. That again, it takes me back to there's something magical about this movie. It was this magical moment where a bunch of unlikely stuff worked. Yeah, I don't know how else to describe it.
And the movie has just a chemistry to it. There's not a boring frame in the movie. Everything looks fantastic. Everything's interesting. All the characters are just popping. So Brody shows up, and I think I think Brody's probably a representative from the museum. They're friends, but he also works with them. Indiana Jones tells him about how he had the idol, he had it in his hand, and you get a little taste of Indy's obsession with this quest, with these things. And what I like about his obsession is it's not about money, it's not about it's about him being fascinated as studying and devoting his whole life to these artifacts, to history, to the significance of these artifacts, and wanting them to be in a museum, feeling like you want to keep and preserve these things. He's passionate, almost ruthlessly passionate about it. And Brody is like, it's cool, it's fine. Then the next scene is, if the opening is a masterclass on how to open a film, the next scene is a masterclass on how to do an exposition scene. Because Brody tells Harrison that the CIA, I guess, or whatever the equivalent was at that time, is there to see Harrison Ford. And they go in this big oversized room where there's a chalkboard, and they're asking about Abner Ravenwood. And Abner Ravenwood was, I believe, like a mentor to Indy and somebody that kind of raised him. And really, probably, probably got him involved in archaeology in the first place.
So I think Brody is like one of the, I mean, he's either the president of that university, or, I mean, he feels like he's the boss. He's the guy who's in charge of the university, right? And I believe that the university includes a museum.
I see.
Seems like they're connected.
Yeah.
The sense I get from the Ravenwood stuff is that he's the one who taught Indy how to be the sort of archaeologist we see Indy as. So most archaeologists do not run through trap-filled caves and dodge poison darts and fight with like natives, right? That's not what archaeologists do. Archaeologists go to a place, they very patiently and slowly dig in the ground and carefully find little pieces of things that they catalog. That's what archaeologists do. So I got the sense that Ravenwood is like, he was like the proto Indiana Jones. He was the guy who went to these extreme places and did what I would call extreme archaeology, right? So there's like the Brody style of archaeologist who's very stuffy, and he's in, he probably spends a lot of time in the library looking things up. And then there's the Ravenwood style of archaeologist where he's running through jungles and, stealing ancient artifacts. I get the sense that was Indy's mentor is that guy. It'd be curious, like, if you saw him, what does he look like? Does he look like Indiana Jones? Does he have that sort of feel? Now, the third movie sort of retcons that and has this other guy show up that is like, looks like Indiana Jones and has the whip and the hat and all that stuff, and sort of made that character the Indiana Jones character before Indy. But I hadn't seen that movie at that point. So when I watched Raiders of the Lost Ark, I imagined Ravenwood as the previous Indy.
So they have this conversation as they're explaining, the CIA, the Americans are basically explaining that Hitler's up to something, Hitler's after something, and they think it could be used as a weapon. And as they're doing that, Indy deduces with Brody that they're looking for the Holy Grail. And what I love
the Ark of the Covenant.
I'm sorry, wrong movie. Ark of the Covenant. What I love about this film is that Indy is the one giving the exposition, not knowing really where it is, and it demonstrates why Indy is the one that they're there to see. So we've seen so many scenes like this where they show up and they say, Hitler's after the Ark of the Covenant. You're the why me? Because you're the best. You're
the best. We need the best.
You're the best archaeologist we got. Well, this scene completely flips that, where they show up and they don't know what it is. They're trying to figure it out.
They just know he's out in the desert looking for something.
He's out in the desert looking for something, and Indy, it's an ancient city in Cairo, and Indy picks it up. He's quicker than them. He's like 5 steps ahead of them, and he's like, oh, this is what it is. They're after this.
Yep.
And him and Brody are having a side conversation, and the enthusiasm and the awe that they have for what the Nazis are after brings you in and makes you fascinated about what it is. And then they don't understand it. So then Indy's got to explain it to them. He shows them pictures. He does the staff of Ra on the thing. And, that he said they know that that Abner Ravenwood has the medallion that goes on the end of the staff of Ra. And that's what they're after. And Indy knows what they're after, why they're going there, where they're digging. And he explains it to them. And so it is a exposition scene that gives you so much, but it's dramatized, it's compelling, it's interesting. And it's a scene, it's one of my favorite scenes in the movie, and it's an exposition scene. It should be boring, which has been done so many times it's boring. If the CIA showed up and they had all the answers, it would not have the same chemistry that it had when we get to watch that.
And they're doing more very subtle world building here. Because the other thing that happens is Brody talks about, the Ark of the Covenant was carried off to the city of Tanis. And then the city was buried in a sandstorm that lasted for a year and disappeared, right? And he doesn't talk about his mythology. He talks about it like it's a real thing that happened. That's more subtle world building. That's another sign that magic works in this world, that magic exists in this world. Because, a professor at a university who's an archaeologist is talking about this clearly magical event of a sandstorm lasting for a year and burying a city. As if it is a real event in history. That's more of that subtle thing, just letting the audience know this stuff works in this world. It looks like our world, but cities can be buried by year-long sandstorms in this world. And the other world building it's doing, which you mentioned, is it is making you afraid of what the Ark is. Because the Ark can bury a city under sand by having a sandstorm for a year. There's the scene where he opens the book and he shows the picture. And all the people are getting hit by that stuff. And they're like, what is that stuff? And he's like, fire, wrath of God, who knows? Right? And then Brody says, an army that carries the Ark before it is invincible. He doesn't say that like it's mythology. He says it like it's a real thing. Again, really good world building here. Just letting the audience know this Ark, it's not just a wooden box. There's some shit going on with this thing. And if we find it, some crazy shit might go down.
And within that scene too, and great character expression through Indy, is he is absolutely fascinated about the historical significance of the Ark. But then they say, like you just quoted, what are these beams here? And he's like, the wrath of God or whatever. Like he just completely doesn't give a shit about that. So, you see Brody, who's really swept up in it. And it's contrasting Indy's skepticism about this thing. This is not, he's not in that, like, just like the opening when they saw their thing that scared him. He's not concerned with that. Yeah. He's concerned about real shit. The dart, he was scared when the darts and shit were getting shot at him, but he wasn't scared about this. So it really shows his disbelief.
Well, and his skepticism about the sort of the magic of the world, which Brody seems to be much more engaged with the sort of magic side of the world. Indy's skepticism is important because we need to follow him through the story and see him more and more lose that skepticism so that we can lose it along with him. He's our stand. Like, the more he loses that skepticism, the more we as the audience also lose it. So that by the time we get to the end, which, we'll get to later, but by the time we get to that huge moment at the end, we're right there with Indy. We get it, man. We know that the magic works and we understand why he's making the choices that he makes. But he has to pull us through the story with him. If everybody starts out believing in magic, that's going to put a barrier between us and the rest of the movie because we don't believe in magic. So it's got to pull us in. It's got to suck us through. And just, again, brilliant world building, brilliant story crafting.
So this next scene is kind of there's some strangeness to this scene. And I love it because it is a little bit bizarre. And I found out later why, but Brody shows up at Indy's house. And Indy's in his robe, and he comes in. Well, the original story was that Indy's with that student in his class at there, and that's why there's an open champagne bottle on the table there. And they cut it out, good cut. And so when he shows up and he's in his robe, the place is all romantic and he's got the champagne and he just ends up pouring the glass, and Brody pulled it off. He got the CIA to fund Indy's trip to go find the Grail. And
the Ark.
The fucking Ark. Fuck. And two things that are really important in this scene is, number one, you get a little bit of foreshadowing of Marion Ravenwood, who they obviously have this history about. And it is so well executed. He's loading up his bag. He's doing this. He gets his last item, and also even how he packs, it really demonstrates who he is. Like, he doesn't give a fuck about his shit. He cares about the quest. He cares about the thing. So he's throwing this stuff in there, and then he stops. And he doesn't look at Brody, but he says, "Do you think she'll be there?" Or something to that effect. And the music changes, the theme and everything. So now you know that there's a she, and there's a history, and you're like, "Ooh, who's that? And what's going on with this?"
And a problematic history.
And a problematic history. Certain things like that. And then, I think he might even have mentioned to Brody in that moment of like, something about their past, but definitely got the sense that it didn't end well. And the next thing they reiterate is Brody is really concerned, and he gives that little speech as the camera's going in on him about the Ark. He says, people have been looking for this for years, and the power, and we don't really know what it is or what it could accomplish. And he goes, "Are you trying to scare me with bedtime stories?" Like, and everything. He's like, "Come on, you sound like my mom." And then
he's still the skeptic.
He's still the skeptic. And then he says, and this is important, and then he says, "I'm a cautious fellow," as he takes out his revolver and he throws it onto his suitcase. So he discounts the spiritual side, and then he hangs on to the real, the real thing that he can put his hands on, the mechanical side, the gun, right? He doesn't think he's going to encounter anything that the gun won't take care of.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that is such an important moment, that he's action guy. He thinks he can handle whatever's coming. He's got his gun. He's got his whip. He says, what a cautious guy I am. Like, he thinks he understands what the threat is. He thinks he understands what this quest is going to entail. And Brody's warnings come across as ridiculous superstition, as nonsense. That's great. We need that moment, because we need to be there with Indy in that moment, so that we can follow Indy through to the dramatic conclusion of this. Again, I keep saying this, and I'm probably boring the 6 people listening, but again, it's just fantastic world building. It's fantastic story crafting. To your point that this is a amazing script. This is how you screenwrite, man. I hope that once in my life I write a screenplay 1/10 as good as this one. Just one time, I'd be satisfied.
Yeah, Kasdan's greedy, because he did this, he did Empire, he did The Big Chill, he could just go on and on. He's one of the towering, he's a brilliant, brilliant guy. So now he gets on a plane, he's headed to Nepal, and this is the first time we introduce the Nazi element of danger. Because there's this weird man, Ronald Lacey, and his tot is on the plane, and you see the newspaper come down and look over at him and then go back up. And you get a little bit of like, oh shit, somebody's going with him, because they know they've connected the dots that Indy's connected to Abner Ravenwood, and also connected the dots that the CIA is visit. So, obviously they know Indy's on the track, and they're going to use him to show them the way to the medallion that goes on the staff of Ra. Yeah. And so then they get on the airplane, and then it has that animated map. Now, here's the thing. So the animated map, the first time I saw it was Casablanca. And I think it was a throwback to Casablanca, because a lot of like the Treasure Sierra Madre, Casablanca, a lot of Humphrey Bogart was used to create the character of Indiana Jones. And so this made me feel like one of those, they gave me that golden age of movies moment when you see the thing take off. I love it. I absolutely love it. It fits in. It's perfect. There are some people that are like, "What is the map shit?" The thing. And I'm like, it's awesome. What are you gonna do? Have them like? How else are you gonna do that traveling thing? Yep. What do you think about it?
I know. I think it's great, and it is very much in the style of the serials that Lucas was such a big fan of. It is a low tech and inexpensive way to show the journey that leaves the audience with exactly the information that they need, right? You know where you were, you know where you end up, and it's super inexpensive, super easy to do. I'm surprised more movies don't do it. It's just a great way to tell people that information.
Right.
Yeah.
So then he lands in Nepal, and I think this is one of the greatest characters. I know I'm gonna just drive people crazy by being, this is one of the greatest. This is one of the greatest.
This is the greatest thing.
But tell me another greater character introduction than Marion Raverwood having a drinking contest with an Austrian climber. And what's also interesting is this is the first, all the scenes up until this point is Indy's point of view. He's driving the scenes. This is the first scene where there's a new character that's driving the scene, and you get a sense of like, oh, this is a very important, this is the next thing. And this is the girl that he was referring to in the scene previous. And she's drinking that Austrian climber over the table. And it's just, there's so much magic and mystery in Nepal. The door opens, you're in this snowy place. You don't know where you are. It's this like little cabin-y bar. There's all these different travels from all over the world in different places. And she's having this drinking contest, and she drinks this guy under the table.
Yep. So this movie is full of fantastic character introductions. Obviously, we talked about Indy's introduction. That cold open is one of the best, as you said, opens ever on film. Marion's introduction is great. But this scene also gives us another great introduction because, yeah, we saw the Nazi on the plane, but all we saw was like a guy peeking over a newspaper. His real introduction is in this scene when he comes into the bar and starts talking to Marion and is threatening her, right? All of that stuff. Fantastic introduction. So not only do we know who our second viewpoint character is with Marion and know that Indy's going to be navigating his troubled romantic history with her and that she's probably our female lead for the movie, but we meet our bad guy. We meet our nemesis for the rest of the movie. And he's so gross. He's like the grossest bad guy ever.
Todd.
He's like small and wizened and oily looking and just like he's just so fucking gross. And the way he talks, like the way he enunciates words is gross. Like he feels like if I met him, I would immediately feel like I needed to beat the shit out of him. Right? Like I'm going to need to beat this guy.
Or
right?
get away from him.
He just has that creepy guy hanging around the grade school look to him, right? Where it's like, that guy's up to no good. He shouldn't be here. Let's call the cops. And
like you know his hands are cold and clammy. Like if you
cold
shook
and
his
clammy,
hands and
every bit of him is cold and clammy. You know that. But the great contrast of him is he's not physically intimidating. He's not physically threatening. He does feel like that little wizened, Gollum-y kind of character, right? But he's so threatening. Even though he's not tough, even though you would never be scared of him if you ran into him. Like in the moment, he's terrifying when he's threatening her. And yeah, it's a brilliant introduction to a bad guy.
And that's a good note. That's a good thing, going forward in terms of characterization is like, we've seen the big intimidating, we've seen, but have somebody that's gross and creepy and weak on purpose, his hands are cold and frail and clammy, and the way he talks, it feels like it's spitty, like there's dribble coming out when he talks.
Yeah.
And he goes in there. But before we get to that, when Indy and Marion see each other for the first time, and it's great. She's like, Indiana Jones, and then comes over and talks to him, and then fucking, wow, gives him that punch. He looks one way and gives him the punch, and Indy absorbs it like, yeah, I fucking deserve that. So we don't know what happened between them, but we know that something happened that really she's having a hard, like it really affected her because she was like, I was just a kid. It did not end well. It did not end well, and I think it took her a long, long time to get over it.
You get the sense that Indy, he had this relationship with her. She was too young. She was less experienced than he was. You definitely get that impression. And that when he broke it off, it was emotionally devastating to her.
Yeah.
Right? That is that. I think that is definitely the impression you get.
There's a history between them, and kind of, I think it's in line with Indy's flaw, is that he's so obsessive about these things that he really, he's alone. He's not married. He lives alone, and he's so upset. This is his passion. This is what he is. And for whatever reason, he didn't love Marion the way, or value her the way that he should have. And it really hurt her. And even, you can even see when they first meet how far he goes towards the end, because when they first see each other, he's not even really interested in her. He just wants the medallion. He's like, I guess I got to go through you because Abner's dead. He asks her where Abner is, and she says he's dead. So now he's got to go through her, and he's like, look, I need the medallion. She even goes to slap him again. He catches it, and he's like, okay, we're over that. I just need the medallion. I give you $3,000. Let's stop talking. What everything. And then he leaves. And then enters that great villain enter scene. We just talked about how gross he was. And then, it's kind of a false exit with Indiana Jones. Then he comes back.
Well, and the first big action sequence of the movie. I mean, we have the open with the traps, which is very actiony and stuff. But this is the first big Indiana Jones as the hero, fighting bad guys, saving the day. This is kind of the first one of the movie. And it shows the stakes, because in that first one, when he's running away from the indigenous people with, when he gets the idol taken away from him and he's running to the plane, he's not really fighting. He doesn't shoot anybody. There's no when Alfred Molina gets killed, he doesn't kill him. The trap kills him. But now we see an action sequence where he's like straight out just shooting guys. Several of the guys who are working for the Nazi get killed. First introduction to, Indy didn't pack that gun for nothing. Like, if shit goes down, he'll reach for that gun, which we haven't seen before this. So this is another moment where we sort of build the character of Indiana Jones. That he's not all about archaeology. He'll do a little gunfighting if he needs to.
Yeah, and with the tone of this movie, it strikes a really tricky place of comedy, having like fun action, silly action, but also action that has a little edge to it and little consequences. And I think this is one of the darkest action sequences within the whole movie. Because, he's shooting people in the face. Their heads are exploding with blood. They're hitting people over the head with the bottles. People are getting burned, and it's a pretty dark, insane sequence. You brought up editing earlier. I think the editing within this scene, like, you never lose orientation of where people are, who's firing, what is the layout, the geography, when Indy's on the bar, where are the bad guys at, when are they coming in? It's really, really well done.
I think this is a perfectly edited movie, which is a combination of two things. It is a great editor, or multiple great editors working on the film, obviously, but you cannot edit in footage that doesn't exist. So a big part of the reason why this movie is so perfectly edited is because Spielberg got every shot the movie needed to have. And that's a testament to him and his ability as a director, because, you say you never lose track of where things are. That means he got all those masters that he needed, that for the geography. He got all of those close-up shots. He got all of those little insert shots. He got everything you need to stitch together this brilliant scene. And then the editor took that material and turned it into this. So again, two more of those 1,000 things that have to go right are happening here.
And Tot goes for the amulet, and it burns his hand, and he runs out and he puts his hand in the snow, and that was a cool scene. And it's a cool way for them, if they were saying, okay, how do we give the Nazis enough information, but they're going to be right about something? How about we burn the information in his hand, And so,
well, and we as the audience don't know that that's what just happened. We know that he burned his hand. We know that, but it's played as the bad guy getting his comeuppance, right? It's played as a comedy action moment where like he goes to grab the thing, he burns his hand, he runs outside, he sticks it in the snow. But the information we're given there when he shows up later, which we'll talk about, I'm sure later, but when he shows up and he says, Sieg Heil, and you see the imprint of the amulet on his hand just after they're talking about how could the Nazis have gotten this information. Everything we needed to know about that was set up in the scene in the bar, and we just forgot about it because it didn't seem important at the time. Again, just great story crafting.
And just to give a little bit, so the shootout happens. Indy saves Marion. They go out in the snow. And she goes, I'm coming with you. I'm your goddamn partner. And she holds up the thing. One of the things I want to talk about is, not only is that a great setup for Marion with the alcohol or anything like that, but it's just there's so much about that character that you learn the history with Indy, but you're also like, what is she doing in Nepal? Why is she trapped out here? And there's no life that you can think of because she can just take up and leave the next day. So it tells so much about her and also creates enough mystery about her and you see her strength and her resourcefulness and her grit. And that, Abner is, a part of that with Indy and her, and which is a great fool for Indy.
And she never comes across as weak or helpless. When they're holding her down and the guys come in at her with the glowing, hot poker, obviously she's freaked out by that, but as anyone would be, that's not because she's a weak character. And then all through the fight, she's an active participant in that fight. She's not waiting for Indy to save her. She's jumping in. She's helping out.
She saves Indy. She shoots the guy.
She saves Indy. Yep.
And
so yeah, like you said, she's a fantastic foil for Indy because she feels like in her own way she is his equal. Like she's at his level. So that's great. Now we know who our two
and
leads
they made a great team. But given this time in the early '80s to have a part like this, but what they did, she's tough and she's resourcefulness, but she's not superhuman. So even now, like there's a lot of there was one type of female character that, and then now they went the other way, which is that they're all superhuman. They're all the this is a real person who is strong but also vulnerable. Hey guys, we did not realize that this podcast was going to be longer than Indiana Jones or the whole Indiana Jones trilogy, but so we're gonna cut this up in two parts. So the other half of this we'll do next week. Please come back and see what happens at the end. Do you think he's going to get the Ark of the Covenant or not? This is our version of those Republic serials we're doing in real time on the podcast. It's very meta.
Such a cliffhanger.
Say goodbye, Ty.
Goodbye.